What the city is talking about.
The news that impacts you.
Welcome to the Montreal Now Podcast.
We don't hear a lot about nurses anymore. And of course, back in the day, our guardian angels during COVID, governments went out of their way to talk about how wonderful they were for doing the work they do. And then it's kind of gotten forgotten about, except for the fact that whenever there is an issue, we hear about in Quebec anyway, the government looking to cut, and not having people on the ground, talking to middle managers and not to actual nurses. Well, our next guest was a nurse. Kathleen Boucher was a registered nurse, and she has authored a book called Healing Canadian Healthcare, Ideas to Improve Nursing Enrolment and Retention. She's on the line. Kathleen, thanks so much for the time today.
Hi, Aaron. How are you?
I'm pretty good. Can you just give our listeners an idea, background-wise, how long have you been doing this? How did you get into the profession?
I've been nursing since 1977. I still work full-time in an ICU. I spent quite a few years as a child correcting clubfoot, and I really liked the nurses that I worked with. So when I graduated from high school, I went into nursing.
All right. So now you've been in that for 87. We're talking about roughly 40 years. I did the math right on that, right? That you've been
48.
That's incredible. What led you to write this book, which implies, of course, and we know the healthcare system here, you hate to say it's broken, but it's called Healing Canadian Healthcare. Why did you feel it was important to write this?
Well, it started with a conversation that I had with my colleagues, and they said that they were tired and that they didn't think they would last until retirement. And the healthcare system was short of nurses before COVID, and of course, with COVID, a lot of nurses took early retirement. And so I thought, well, the nursing schools and the government, provincially and federally, are trying their best to figure out a way to get the system fortified. And I thought, well, maybe we should take a different approach. Maybe we should ask all of Canada to help us strengthen the healthcare system, which is a rather lofty goal. Mm-hmm. But I thought if we can do that, then we are really helping everyone.
So if you look back on how, and I don't want to necessarily get into how nursing has changed overall, but why are we in worse shape now, do you believe, than we were, say, when you first started or that long ago?
It goes up and down. I mean, my worst shift was when I was 23, and we only had 2 nurses for 32 patients. Everybody called in sick. So there are circumstances, even when I started, that we were short of nurses. But it seems, I think, from my analysis, the problem is that we're not getting the information to the kids, the young people that are choosing their career path. And if we can do that and help the public understand, first of all, we have a problem, and second of all, learn about nursing, then we elevate the profession so that we have more people thinking about going into nursing. And then if they know more about nursing, when they get into nursing, the attrition rate is reduced. So there's less of a dropout within the first year.
Can I ask why you think fewer people are choosing? Like, what in the profession is making these people decide, you know what, this is not for me? You mentioned people who work in it now who are tired. What are young people who choose or otherwise might have chosen to go into the profession making their decisions now based on what? What are they hearing, do you think?
You mean based on why they're staying, or based on
why
they
don't want to get into nursing at all? I mean, we used to have people who, would have loved to.
Okay, so here's I think we have a lot of bad press about nursing, but nobody talks about how great it is and the benefits that go along with nursing. And nobody talks about the many things and the many specialties that you can go into. Do you want to just to cite some of the things that you can go into in nursing?
Well, so you mentioned, no, you don't have to, but I mean, there are different areas you can go into. I'm kind of more concerned with why people are choosing not to go into nursing in general.
Because I don't think they know about nursing. I don't think they know what nursing is all about. And I think the public gets their information from TV shows.
Mm-hmm. Which glorify it or make it worse?
Oh, it makes it worse.
Does it?
Because here's the thing, there was a study that showed that the public puts doctors on pedestals and nurses are servants that just follow doctors' orders. And that's not the case. The case is it's a completely different mindset. Nurses and doctors work as a team, and nurses are the eyes and ears for any potential problem that shows up and then notifies the doctor. So say you have an ICU patient and you've got a low blood pressure and the doctor orders dopamine. But dopamine can raise the person's heart rate. So the patient has a heart rate of 135. The nurse calls back the doctor and says, I can't give dopamine. I need something else because the heart rate's 135. If she did it blindly, she would make the person worse. So the nurses look after patients and are always on a lookout for potential problems that can make the person worse, and then notify the doctor, this is what's happening. So the doctor has a different education, but they have to work cohesively with nurses.
I would ask, just as we wrap up, how do you think, and I know part of the book, I think towards the end, talks about, getting the public involved and understanding what nurses do. How does the public, or what should the public do with respect to acknowledging nurses, do you think?
I think the easiest thing for the public to do is look locally at who is working as nurses and highlight their skills, whether it's editorials in newspapers, radio, podcasts. Have them come to high schools, talk about what they do, then have the students do research as to what nurses do. Pick a specialty that they like. They might not want to go into nursing, but they know that their parents or their grandparents or their aunts and uncles may need to be in the medical field. So it's a good thing to know about nursing.
Good idea. Good place to start. I will mention again, for people who want to see or read the book, it is called Healing Canadian Healthcare, Ideas to Improve Nursing Enrolment and Retention here in this country. You're up on Amazon, I believe, right? You can buy the book there?
I'm on Amazon internationally, Barnes & Noble, and Chapters has it as an e-book.
Kathleen, I thank you so much for the time. Very much appreciated. Wish you luck.
My pleasure. Thank you.
You bet.
Bringing you the breaking news and the people making it. Montreal Now with Aaron Rand. CJAD 800.
Nothing bad can happen. It can only good happen. But with Tylenol, don't take it. Don't take it. And if you can't live, if your fever is so bad, you have to take one because there's no alternative to that. Sadly, first question, what can you take instead? It's actually, there's not an alternative to that. And as you know, other of the medicines are absolutely proven bad. I mean, they've been proven bad with the aspirins and the Advils and others, right? And they've been proven bad.
Yeah, so now he's a medical doctor giving medical advice, apparently. So, Joe, give me your take on this link that he tried to create between Tylenol and autism, and what the numbers or what the facts or the science actually tells us.
I don't get agitated all that easily. But when I watched that press conference yesterday, it did it for me. Because it raised scientific illiteracy to lofty heights. When these two people, Kennedy and Trump, were there with spouting lie after lie after lie, it was really terrible. I mean, first of all, just the statistics that they quote about the incidence of autism was totally wrong. There was not 1 in 10,000 cases 20 years ago and 1 in hundreds of cases now. It's about 1 in 30 now. That was just completely wrong. Now, with the Tylenol business, first of all, there's a real issue with him going after Tylenol by Tylenol, the name, which is the trade name of acetaminophen. Acetaminophen is available in many, many forms. You can buy it generically. You can buy it as Adasol. There are many different versions. So it is totally irresponsible to pick on one particular brand when that isn't even what most people use. Most people buy acetaminophen in the pharmacy in the generic version. Anyway, the allegation that he said that it causes autism in children if their mother was taking acetaminophen during pregnancy. Statistically, this is just not so. There have been some studies that suggested a possible link, observational studies, but there are numerous studies that have not found any such link. But that isn't even the real issue here. The real issue was him saying that no pregnant woman should ever take Tylenol. Well, if you have a fever while you're pregnant and you have pains while you're pregnant, that is a risk to the fetus. You have to control that fever and you have to control that pain. And there really is no other drug that can be used at that time. The nonsteroidal anti-inflammatories cannot be used during pregnancy. And acetaminophen can take away the fever and can control pain. Now, of course, it should not be used recklessly. It should be used on the advice of a physician. But the advice should come from a physician, not from Trump, who has zero scientific knowledge. This is really repugnant when you hear someone giving medical advice. He says, I think that no pregnant woman should ever take Tylenol. Who on earth are you to say that? You have zero background. I don't think that he could define what autism is. I would wager on that he could not give an explanation for what it is. And here he is giving this advice, which is going to be problematic for a lot of births, because there are going to be babies born with problems because their mothers refused to take Tylenol when they had a high fever or when they had some sort of pain. And then he also went on to say that children should not get the hepatitis B vaccine because it is only sexually transmitted, so it's not appropriate for children. This is absolutely wrong. It is just not true. Hepatitis B can be transmitted in various ways, and children can acquire it from a mother who is infected, which happens in many, many cases today because many women are not even aware that they're harboring the virus. And when you get vaccinated right after birth, it prevents the virus from going into action because you produce antibodies to it. So there is very, very good reason why children should get a vaccine for hepatitis B. And to say that hepatitis B is only transmitted sexually and therefore children don't need to be vaccinated is absolutely irresponsible drivel. But he has the pulpit. He's president of the U.S., and therefore people think that whatever he says must be so. Yeah. And then, of course, he went on this tirade against vaccines, that children are getting vaccines doses like what horses are getting. I mean, this is absolutely absurd. You know, he says they're getting 80 vaccines. No, they're not getting 80 vaccines. They're getting 6 vaccines. And then he goes on with saying that the vaccines should never be given once, that the MMR vaccine should be divided into doses. Well, this has been studied extensively by people who know what they are doing, experts in the field. And Trump is not someone who should be pontificating on when people should be getting vaccines. Neither is Kennedy, who also has zero background. So, I mean, the situation is absolutely outrageous. You know, that we are getting medical advice from two people who have zero scientific background.
We'll leave it at that, Joe. I think a lot of people agree. Let me move on and talk about what the other headline you had today, because I don't understand this. Nature is not benign. We've got about a minute and a half here. How natural substances can kill.
Okay. I was watching White Lotus. Did you see that series on TV? Yeah. It was very good. And you remember that the season 3 was all about a father who lost all his money, and then he decided to do away with his whole family. Yeah. And he was going to do this
by making a smoothie in the blender, right?
That's right. He was going to do this by using the seeds from the fruit that grows on what is called the suicide tree. It's also called the pong pong tree. And the fact is that this was scientifically sound, unlike what Trump says, because this does contain a very, very potent toxic substance, and it can indeed kill you. It's called cerberin, and it's a cardiac glycoside that will stop the heart from beating. And it is highly, highly potent. So they got the science right. It really could have killed everyone, but he changed his mind at the last minute, and just as they were going to drink the concoction that he had made with the kernels of this fruit, he knocked it out of their hands. So they never developed any kind of toxicity. But had they been poisoned by it, interesting enough, the only antidote is atropine, which is also a natural product. It comes from the belladonna plant. So here we have this interesting example of nature that can kill, but also nature that can cure. So
amazing.
Natural chemistry is very interesting.
The things you learn on this show. Dr. Joe Schwarcz. Joe, thank you. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Aaron.
Take care.
The very latest news, reported and discussed. Welcome back to Montreal Now on CJAD 800.
Time for us to check in with Chris Dimakos. He's our CJAD 800 legal contributor. And this time around, something a little bit different. And I actually really like this angle. So there's been so much talk, of course, about Jimmy Kimmel coming back last night, 3 days later, I guess, after the whole situation where he did his monologue the other day, talking about Charlie Kirk. And, of course, everyone from the president to the head of the FCC weighed in. And then the next thing you know, of course, the show was canceled, but it was back last night. So I want you to hear just a very small part of the opening monologue, and then we'll get into this.
I want to thank the people who don't support my show and what I believe, but support my right to share those beliefs anyway.
Okay. Look, it went on for a while. That's obviously a very small snippet. But, Chris, we want to take, and I think this is a great idea, from the perspective of what might have happened legally, because we know that Disney, which owns ABC, when they pulled the plug here, we know that after that there were in fact meetings between Jimmy Kimmel and his people and the folks over at Disney. So what can we imagine might have happened in those conversations?
Right. And before we even begin, just to set the framework here, because many people I've heard opinions, free speech obviously was a main part of what Jimmy Kimmel's monologue implicated. And whenever you have a government entity that's involved, well, then free speech and restrictions on free speech can be a legal issue, not when it's two private entities. Now, I'm not saying that just because Disney was involved in pulling him off, that there might have not been an implication from a government entity, like you mentioned FCC, you mentioned Trump, you mentioned the administration. That can all come into play. But the mere act of Disney pulling Jimmy Kimmel off the air for 3 days, that's an employer who decided to pull them off. And Jimmy Kimmel, without a doubt in my mind, met with his lawyers, and they discussed, hey, what are our options here? We have potential recourse against Disney for an employment breach in our contract. Can we potentially have a lawsuit against the government for restricting my free speech by indirectly maybe lobbying Disney, maybe lobbying ABC to do these things? So these are all conversations that Jimmy Kimmel had with his lawyers. And after hearing the monologue, although I think it was well done, it was very clear to me that lawyers had a lot to do with that monologue, as much as any speechwriter did that worked on his cast. Because if you notice, there are certain points in that monologue where he either addressed something or maybe didn't come out and take a concrete position on it. And I think it's because his lawyers advised them, hey, it's in your best interest to say this instead of maybe going to this point here. So that being said, just to give you an overview, there's no question in my mind that Jimmy Kimmel talked to his lawyers more than anyone in almost those past 3 days. And they were part of the discussions with ABC, with Disney, and anyone else for that matter. Okay,
so he's under contract, by the way, right? That's still the case.
Right.
So he has an argument there with respect to, and we've talked about this on numerous occasions here, the idea of how this reflects on your employer, right? In this particular case, that's something, as I said, we've discussed before. Obviously, the employer here, Disney, ABC, they heard the backlash, they saw it, they felt it. So what was that conversation like, do you think, when it came time to say, look, we're going to have you back because we see all the backlash, right, from people canceling subscriptions or picketing in front of ABC? What would that have been like, do you imagine, in that boardroom?
Right. So what I think happened was, I think Disney, if I was working with Disney and I represented Disney and ABC, my conversations would be something to the effect of, Jimmy, it's not so much what you said, because what you said was you made a joke about the president, and you made, that's fine. It goes without saying. That's part of your platform. But it's maybe more a case of what wasn't said. Maybe they wanted to hear more of an explicit, this is Disney talking, more of an explicit condemnation of violence. Maybe they want a little more of that, because possibly you'd have sponsors who were not happy with that. But that being said, I think it was more a question of, hey, look, we're in a very critical time right now. It's highly politicized. We would have maybe wanted you to take more of a neutral approach. And that's what Disney lawyers are probably telling Jimmy Kimmel's lawyers. And then vice versa, they're saying, hey, listen, part of my employment contract, I'm a comedian, I'm able to do this stuff. This is within the realm of what I'm able to do and the discretion that I have on this platform. Nothing to do with free speech, because again, free speech needs to involve a government that's restricted. So you and your employer, you can allege, hey, my rights to free speech are being violated. And that's a misconception that I see everywhere from all reports. They're talking about how, free speech, and Jimmy Kimmel was angry about free speech with Disney. That's not legally sound. What can be legally made as an argument is maybe Disney felt pressure from the FCC. Maybe Disney felt pressure from the administration. Maybe that's what happened. And although it's not explicit, maybe the case can be made that they made their decision based on that pressure. And in that case, you have a government entity that's involved in trying to restrict speech. So again, some of this can get very complicated, but for everyone who's listening right now, you have to understand that the dynamic between Jimmy Kimmel and Disney and ABC, those parties combined, there's very little talk about free speech violation. In fact, it would not come up. If anything, it would be more of an employment discretion. Hey, you can do this, you can't do this. Right. What does my contract allow me to say? Doesn't allow me to say.
So it's about context as much or more than anything else.
Absolutely, and again, they are a profit business. They just raised the prices, Disney, today on the platform. So they're there to make profit. They're there to please shareholders, and they have the right to tell someone, hey, you know what? What you said, although maybe it violated absolutely no free speech laws, it didn't do anything wrong. It just discouraged a lot of our subscribers to move on, and we don't want that. We want them to come. We want as many people as possible on the platform. So that's what Disney can tell Jimmy. And when I heard about his monologue, when I read it, what I believe his lawyers were telling him was, listen, you have to go and retouch some of that stuff. Maybe you want to acknowledge, the tragedy, and maybe you want to reach out and to the other side, people who might be slightly more in the middle. But at the same time, you definitely want to spend a lot of time talking about free speech, because it's almost like you're having that narrative that's saying, hey, government, hey, FCC, don't get involved with this stuff. This should never be the instance. You shouldn't be commenting on this. You shouldn't be lobbying and telling us we're going to have a difficult time with licenses. That's not where we want our country to be. So I think he spent the majority of the time talking about free speech. And I think that was an anticipation of what maybe lies ahead in terms of the relationship between Disney and ABC and the FCC. Yeah. And I think that there was some groundwork laid there from a legal perspective that I noticed you probably came from his lawyers as much as it did from him.
Just as a last question, because we got to wrap up, one of the things that was talked about a lot was this idea of him actually making an apology, which he did in fact not make last night, right? He said, I didn't intend something, but he didn't apologize. Do you think that had come up?
I definitely think it came up, and I definitely think his lawyer says, don't apologize, because if you apologize, it's an admission. And I think you're right. He touched on it very carefully. He walked through that by saying, if roles were reversed, I probably would have been offended also. And he acknowledged it. He acknowledged the fact that what was said was misinterpreted. It wasn't his intention. But you're absolutely right, Aaron. He did not explicitly apologize, and I believe that his lawyers told him, stay away from that. You don't want to do that. It actually puts you in a worse position. If you don't have to, try to walk around it.
Interesting analysis. Chris, thanks so much. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Aaron.
Because you don't want to miss a thing. Montreal Now on CJAD 800.
All right, let's say good afternoon to Carmi Levy. He is our CTV tech analyst, joins us every Thursday afternoon. Carmi, I got to start with this story because this has been generating a lot of buzz, but it does tie into tech, kind of. This is about an employee at RBC, right, charged. And they caught him, by the way. This goes back a couple of months, but it's only making news now. So he managed somehow to access Prime Minister Mark Carney's personal data, and apparently tried to access Justin Trudeau's as well, but the Justin Trudeau he found was not Justin Trudeau, the former Prime Minister. But that aside, it does make people wonder. We've heard, of course, about bank scams and all kinds of stuff. How easy was it for something like this to happen?
Well, the fact that it happened at all, I think, illustrates that it was ridiculously easy, that, once this employee signed into whatever RBC system he was given access to, he essentially had the keys to the kingdom, and that shouldn't be the case. Banks should have more compartmentalized systems in place so that you need to re-authenticate on each system in order to validate that you deserve to be there, whereas that was not the case in this case. And this investigation went back 2 years. In other words, they started detecting weird things starting 2 years ago, but he was only arrested in July, and we only found out about it now. So there are a whole lot of questions here that really suggest very lax internal controls within RBC. And I think what frightens me about this is if it can happen to the Prime Minister, it can happen to anyone. That,
right.
The relationship that we have with our banks and all of our personal information and financial information on file, well, are they ensuring that all of their employees are on the up and up? Are they putting appropriate controls in place to stop this kind of thing from happening? We need answers. And right now, obviously, RBC not saying a whole lot, but this really should shake us all to our core. We thought the banking system was safe. That is obviously not the case.
By the way, to your point, right, if they could do this to get at Mark Carney's data, imagine, as you just said, what they can do to get at anybody's data. But beyond just RBC here, do we have a problem across the sector, across the banking sector, do you think?
I think we do, in my IT career, and I've worked in IT. I worked in the financial services industry, largely for investment companies and insurance companies, and we had very strict rules in place that if you didn't have a legitimate reason to access a particular system, well, then you didn't get it. And so, if I wanted to, if I was, for example, I was a project manager at one point. If I was working on a project on a particular system, I had to go through all sorts of security loops and hoops to get at that system. And if I couldn't meet the standards, I didn't get access to it, and I had to find some other project to work on. So obviously, some organizations seem to have tighter internal controls. But this particular case, at least what we know about it so far, we'll learn more over time. But just the fact that this happened at all, and the fact that it persisted for as long as it did, suggests that those controls weren't there. And I think this is across the industry. I think a lot of banks, it costs money to do this. It sometimes slows down the pace of business. It can be an annoyance to have that much security internally. Workers complain about it because it slows them down. And I think the entire industry needs to kind of look at this and look in a mirror and go, I think we need to do better.
Let me move on to speaking of hacks on a much, much bigger scale. This is a big story earlier in the week as well. Massive telecom threat. This was discovered in New York while the UN General Assembly was in session. Now, I understand this goes back a while, but it could have, had it not been caught, I guess, been activated and basically brought down the entire communication system in New York. What's the story?
Yeah, this is a frightening story. So the Secret Service had actually been doing an investigation into general threats to the telecommunications system. And they discovered there were a number of locations in New York. They're basically like small data centers with a whole bunch of computers, servers, in which you could plug in SIM cards. And those are exactly the same SIM cards that most of us have in our smartphones. It's what allows our smartphone to authenticate onto the wireless network. If you don't have a SIM card, you're not making wireless calls, you're not sending texts or doing anything. And so the way these would work, there were 300 different servers, 100,000 SIM cards already plugged in, ready to go, with about 2 to 3 times as many in boxes ready to be installed. And the way it would have worked is if this thing had been flipped on, it would have been able to overwhelm the wireless network with millions of anonymous text messages and anonymous phone calls, to the point point that it would just literally crash the network because it would just be overloaded. And this was around the same time as the UN General Assembly was meeting. Some of the major world leaders, including the U.S. president, were there. Mark Carney was there. And imagine having no wireless service in an entire geographic area. It would have been an absolute disaster. And quite frankly, that this was discovered before they were able to flip it on we're incredibly lucky. What scares me here particularly is these aren't just some kids, playing with technology. This is millions of dollars worth of equipment. This is really sophisticated kinds of cyber threat. So it could be, investigators are thinking it could be state-sponsored. It could be someone with an axe to grind. It's essentially, this is kind of like cyber insecurity raised to a terrifying new level. We've got to pay attention. They're going after infrastructure now. This time we got lucky. Next time, maybe not.
By the way, to your point, right, this wasn't some guy, in his basement putting this all together, but there have been no arrests, so there's no foreign entity here necessarily that's been found or any clues to who this might have been, right?
Exactly, and I think part of that is it's the Secret Service. They never say anything as you would expect them not to. And I think the investigation is still continuing. I think they're trying to identify who are the bad guys, who are the threat actors, and trying to dig into that. And of course, saying publicly right now who they think it is would probably compromise that investigation. So it's radio silence for now, but we'll learn more about this over time. And I would suspect that once we learn who it was, it is not going to surprise us at all. I'm willing to bet it's one of the top 4 sponsors of state-sponsored cyber insecurity, either Russia, China, North Korea, or Iran, or maybe some combination of them all.
Well, we shall see. All right, let me get to this next story because I think for every parent who's ever told their child, put down your iPad for a minute, they'll love this story. So this is a pilot on Spirit Airlines, and what happened here?
He was flying over they were heading to Boston, and they were near Long Island. And as it happened, Air Force One happened to be flying nearby as well on their way to the UK with the president on board. And the air traffic controller was giving instructions to the Spirit pilot and had to repeat those instructions several times to the point that he finally told him to pay attention. And then finally, the air traffic controller got so exasperated because the pilot was not answering him or only answering him after 4 or 5 attempts. He finally told him to, I got to talk to you twice every time. Get off the iPad. And so he finally did listen in. He landed safely. Spirit Airlines says that there was never risk of an imminent collision. They got within 11 miles of each other, but it was close enough that ATC raised the alarm. And I think this is an indication. Pilots used to carry like binders and bags filled with their flight plans and their maps and all that. Now they carry iPads, and that has all the software on it that helps them plan their trips, and they kind of have them propped up on the flight deck as they fly. The worry here is that this pilot got a little bit distracted, stopped paying attention to air traffic control. So you can be distracted in the air as well, not just on St. Catherine Street.
Yep, on his iPad. We don't know what. They're never going to let us know if he was playing a game or actually doing work, but yeah, distracted by his iPad. Final story, real quick. We heard this last week. This is in the U.S., but it applies to people here. So the Federal Trade Commission is suing Ticketmaster for allegedly colluding with resellers. This is a story that's been going on forever. Does this make a difference this time around?
I think it will. This one might very well stick because they're going after the owner of Ticketmaster, Live Nation, and they're basically saying that they are helping data brokers, so ticket brokers who swoop in and buy all the tickets within the first couple of minutes of availability, then resell them at scandalous prices on their other platforms. They're saying not only are they looking the other way when this happens, but they're actually providing technical support to these brokers, making it easy for them to goose prices and rip the rest of us off. They've made over $16 billion in fees in the last 6 years alone, and the Federal Trade Commission says it's got to stop. They're suing the company along with 7 states. So this is really big. It will set an important precedent because it is common law. It'll apply across most of Canada as well if this case does end up in a conviction.
Well, a lot of people listening to this think it's about time if it does in fact happen. All right.
Right on. Exactly. I'm sick of being ripped off, and all I want to do is go to a concert.
Carmi Levy, CTV Tech Analyst. Thank you, Carmi.
Thanks so much, Aaron.
Take good care.
Bringing you the breaking news and the people making it. Montreal Now with Aaron Rand. CJAD 800.
I like to find weird stories just that kind of, either catch my attention or have gone viral for some reason, right? Just to see what's going on. So I saw this one today. Listen to this. There's a sushi chef in Kitimat, BC, who is going viral. Why? For refusing to provide extra soy sauce with his sushi when you order it at his restaurant, and that includes even if you want to pay for it. He said he would turn down even $1,000. Why? Because he says it drowns out the flavors he's working so hard to create. This thing is going viral. It's kind of like the soup Nazi from Seinfeld, right? No soup for you. This is no soy sauce for you. So I thought, who better to weigh in on this than my friend, notable sushi chef, renowned sushi chef, Antonio Park, who is on the line. Hey, Antonio.
Hey, Aaron.
So first of all, thank you for. I know you're doing lunch service and stuff like that. I'm not going to keep you too long. So I gave you the sort of gist of this story this morning on no, you can't get extra soy sauce. What's the deal here? What do you think?
It is a bit. Well, it's not so crazy. It's his restaurant. He can do whatever he wants to do it in his restaurant, right? At the end of the day, he works hard for his food and his craft. I think he has the responsibility and the will and he wants to be happy. That's what when I read the article that you sent me, it said, it makes me mad the whole day. But if that makes you mad, then you got to find a way to be happy. Okay. Happiness is everything in life. So.
I want to ask, though, with respect to, I think he says in the article that it's, first of all, it's not good for you to be eating all the soy sauce, right? You're basically consuming salt. And that's just a problem health-wise. Do you agree with that?
100%.
Okay.
If you're eating a lot of salt, obviously sodium is not that great for you, but, a lot of people like to eat their own way. So I don't think it's a bad thing to kind of choose the way you want to eat. You pay for the food. It's your food. So at the end of the day, it's your choice to respect or not. I do respect what the chef is doing at the end of the day. But, have you gone to see their menu at their restaurant? So I saw their menu in the restaurant. It's mostly Mackies that they serve.
Okay.
So I like what his talk on that no soya sauce. Very hard to understand what is his intentions behind it exactly.
By the way, just so when you say Mackie, you mean rolls, right?
Rolls, yeah,
right,
rolls.
Okay.
There's soya sauce. There's sauce in it.
So not just sushi, but actual rolls.
Yeah, actual rolls. Yeah. So I don't think he serves a lot of sushi itself because the way that I see it on their menu, they don't do that. But secondly,
Go ahead.
The other thing that I notice about this is that. So how does he serve his sushi? Does he brush every single nigiri the way that I do it at Park? Or does he serve it without brushing the soy sauce? This is where he gets a bit confusing on his thing,
Okay. I got to go. I appreciate your time. By the way, just real quick, are there good soy sauces and bad soy sauces, or is soy sauce?
No, soy sauce. There's multiple ways of different soy sauce, different fermentation, different beans, different water. It depends what you do with the soy sauce, but they're out there. They're high-end soy sauce. They're cheaper soy sauce. So watch it out there. Read the label.
Read the label, everybody.
Read the label.
Perfect.
Learn.
Hey, pal.
Learn.
I appreciate your time. Go back to cooking. I love you. I'll see you soon.
All right, buddy.
Take good care. All right, Antonio Park from Park, he's renowned, right? The best sushi restaurant in town, I think. Known him for a long, long time. For you folks who've lived in Montreal for a while, remember Kaizen? Anybody? Yeah? On St. Catherine? All the way back then. That's 25 years ago.
This has been the Montreal Now Podcast.
Listen live on your radio weekday afternoons from 2 to 6
on CJAD 800
or through the iHeartRadio app.
Canadian women are looking for more out of themselves, their businesses, their elected leaders, and the world around them.
And that's why we're thrilled to introduce the Honest Talk podcast.
I'm Jennifer Stewart.
And I'm Catherine Clark. And in this podcast, we interview Canada's most inspiring women.
Entrepreneurs, artists, athletes, politicians, and newsmakers, all at different stages of their journey.
So if you're looking to connect, then we hope you'll join us.
Listen to the Honest Talk podcast on iHeartRadio or wherever you listen to your podcasts.